I read 32 nonfiction books in 2024. Most of them were good, but 5 of them were total game changers for my writing process. I know how hard good books are to come by, and I'm confident these books will help any writer who is committed to the creative act. And speaking of, that's the first book I want to talk about, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Rather than a book of actionable advice for creatives, this book reads like a religious text to pore over when in need of a creative lift. Every chapter is concise, only spanning a couple of pages, and covers one of the many different aspects of the creative life. Topics range from the creative mindset, habits, and even cosmic sources of inspiration. It's filled with plenty of pithy, quotable phrases like this one: failure is the information you need to get where you're going. But don't let the guru vibes deter you from giving this book a chance. It's filled with decades of wisdom from a guy who spent his entire career working with some of the world's most talented musicians, a notoriously fickle breed of artists, and I should know, considering I'm one myself. Where I found the most value in this book was when I was struggling with the more emotional side of writing and creating videos for an audience. Writer's block and procrastination, perfectionism, they're all symptoms of an underlying emotional stress involved with the creative act. Writer's block isn't a problem of generating ideas, it's just a belief that they all suck. And procrastination isn't a problem of laziness, it's the pain of committing to one of those ideas. And perfectionism isn't really a problem of skill, it's a fear of being judged. And when faced with one of these nasty problems, I would flip through the pages of this book and I'd find phrases calling out to my exact situation. Like when I was struggling to find my footing on YouTube, I glanced at this passage. The work reveals itself as you go. Reading that was a reminder that you don't figure things out in a vacuum and then go bring it out into the world perfectly planned. You start moving and then iterate as you go. You take a step forward even though you don't know exactly where you're going, and having faith that you'll figure it out along the way is all you need to take the first step. I think this quote perfectly encapsulates the book's overall message. Living life as an artist is a practice. You are either engaging in the practice or you're not. We tend to think of the artist's work as the output. The real work of the artist is a way of being in the world. I highly recommend this book as a source of energy and a compass for when you're feeling lost in the process. The path toward mastery in any creative field is a long and challenging one, which is why this next book is so important for anyone looking to improve their skills. Mastery by Robert Greene. Best known for writing The 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene is considered one of the best living nonfiction writers of our time. Mastery is a guide for those embarking on an apprenticeship towards mastery of a craft. It's a much needed guide in the modern world because the path is riddled with pitfalls. Every beginner makes the same mistakes. They try to innovate before learning the fundamentals. They seek out shortcuts to speed up the learning process. They ignore the advice of those who came before them, believing they're not relevant to their own process. These mistakes hide the reality that attaining mastery in any field requires immense struggle, dedication, and an open mind toward learning from those ahead. And I'm guilty of making these same mistakes in my own writing journey. Instead of studying the greats, I was spending hours innovating my own frameworks, and rather than slowly reading and taking notes, I would have AI summarize information for me to save on time. My social media feed became filled with growth hacks and instant fixes and get-rich-quick schemes. Reading Mastery just showed me how foolish and immature I was actually being about the learning process, and how little I respected the craft of writing. This line in particular stopped me in my tracks. The very desire to find shortcuts makes you eminently unsuited for any kind of mastery. Yeah, that one hurt. This book had a major impact on my process, and after reading it, I went all in on adopting the apprentice mindset. Now I don't waste time trying to entertain the idea of originality or fast-tracking my path towards success. It's helped me realize that to become great requires a humble ego, an appetite for the wisdom of the past, and most importantly, consistent effort. He sums it up nicely in this one sentence. The goal of an apprenticeship is not money, a good position, or a diploma, but rather the transformation of your mind and character, the first transformation on the way to mastery. That's the process this book helped me commit to. Rather than try to rush things and get results as fast as possible, I'm focusing on learning and developing and becoming a practitioner of the craft. Now, in an effort to learn more about the craft of writing, I picked up the next book that totally blew my mind open with its thesis, Wonderworks by Angus Fletcher. Not many people have heard of this book, but it's definitely one that should be on every writer and book lover's reading list. Angus Fletcher is an interesting character. He started his career in neuroscience working for years in a lab at the University of Michigan. He realized that unlike a computer, the human brain doesn't function logically. It's emotional, creative, and powered by a story. He left the lab to get his PhD in literature at Yale, then spent the next few decades studying the connection between the brain and story. Wonderworks is the culmination of his expertise, where he puts forth the thesis that different story structures have different and measurable cognitive effects on the brain. Now, these neural benefits range from processing grief to recovering from trauma and stimulating creativity. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is easily one of the most overlooked books I've ever read. Fletcher doesn't just expand some vague theory that could have been a blog post like so many writers who have a new idea do. Each chapter he lays out a story structure, each with its own unique cognitive benefit, based on literature written by some of history's greatest minds, 25 of them in total. He provides historical context as well as scientific backing for each of his claims, living up to his expertise as both a neuroscientist and a master of literature. This book completely opened my mind to the power of writing, not only as a tool for communication and thinking, but a technology for healing and enhancing the human brain. I'm one of those people who typically avoid fiction because I've always found history to be just more up my alley, but this book inspired me to open my mind to all kinds of stories and to start looking at fiction as a serious technology for enhancing the human condition. Now, funny enough, there's a chapter called Feed Your Creativity where he talks about nursery rhymes and how they prime our brain to feel more creative. Many studies have shown that when we're feeling good and playful, we tend to generate more creative ideas. So, as silly as it sounds, this has led to me reading Dr. Seuss books before writing sessions when I'm feeling particularly stuck. Something about the bounciness of the words and the carefree attitude of a book like Cat in the Hat really does get me in the creative spirit. Is that just an antidote? Well, yeah. But a little green eggs and ham never killed anybody. So try it out next time you're in a creative rut, and don't sleep on Wonderworks. It's a fantastic book. The next book I want to talk about is Rest by Alex Payne. Now, everyone has had a shower thought that turned out to be a stroke of genius. But why does it seem like that only happens when you're away from your work, when your mind is wandering? Well, that's exactly what this book Rest is all about. Everything that goes into the creative process that isn't actually the work. These are things we take for granted and don't typically view as important to the process, which leads us to sacrifice our health and sanity at the altar of productivity. But ditching rest in favor of more work is actually killing your creativity. Payne references tons of research on how to enhance your creative output without overwhelming yourself with work and derailing your progress by burning out. Now, this book quite literally saved me from burning out myself. I was falling into the trap of busyness as a proxy for productive output, and it nearly derailed my newfound love of writing. I tried to be on all the social media platforms, doing graphic design, writing, researching, networking, and building every spare moment of time I had outside of my full-time job. And this frantic push to do more ended up hurting my creative process more than it helped. I would get stressed out and anxious and frustrated when things didn't go as planned. None of these emotional states are conducive to creative work. Rest equipped me with the knowledge I needed to understand how balance in my life would actually lead to more success and longevity. I started dedicating more time to walking and journaling in the morning. I stopped staying up late to finish work, and I started going to bed earlier so I could get 8 hours of sleep. Exercise became a non-negotiable, and with balance restored, I felt more control in my life with more creative ideas as an added bonus. Before, I used to fill any spare moment with activity and constantly context switch, unable to truly focus on anything. But Payne's chapter on optimal creative work blocks showed me that I was self-sabotaging by working in this manner. What I do now is schedule a 2 to 4 hour creative work block where I do all my writing, video editing, and designing work. Everything outside of that block is dedicated to active rest activities and mentally energizing things like reading or socializing. If you have any interest in how creativity works on a subconscious level, or you feel like you don't know how to rest, this book is for you. But before you run off to check it out, I have one more book that I want to share with you, and I saved my favorite for last. That's The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper by Roland Allen. Now, I bought this book on a whim while browsing a bookstore on my birthday, and it earned some looks of skepticism from my family. One of them even jabbed, "I can't think of anything more boring to read than a history of notebooks." But The Notebook turned out to be anything but boring. I had no idea what to expect, but what I found inside was a witty book that was informative, made me laugh, and a chapter on patient diaries even drew a tear from me. Now, what kind of history book makes a grown man weep? It was an amazing read and completely rekindled my nostalgic love of notebooks. Of all the books I read this year, this one had the biggest impact on my writing process by far. Before reading this book, I had been red-pilled into believing digital note-taking tools were superior and physical notebooks were an archaic thing of the past. I was journaling on an app, taking notes in Notion, doing all my writing on a laptop, brainstorming in templated documents, and I would spend hours maintaining all my files in an increasingly complex digital system of personal knowledge. But this book gave me a new lens to view creative work. The most remarkable people throughout history used little more than a pen and paper, and yet for some reason, everyone is obsessed with digital tools now. And it's not surprising. Every company promises you won't have to struggle to write ever again if you just use their groundbreaking software to do the thinking for you. The Notebook was a reminder that you have everything you need to create. You don't need advanced tools, software, or a fancy app. Thinking on paper is the foundation of everything. Not only that, the book provides a compelling case that writing by hand on paper may have additional benefits to encoding information to memory, enhancing visual cognition, and could ultimately lead to more effective writing overall. So given that context, I do most of my writing by hand now unless I'm in a pinch for time. All of my notes are in notebooks and note cards. I write most of my first drafts for the newsletter by hand before editing them. Instead of a phone app for all my notes, I carry a pocket notebook with me to log ideas, quotes, and things I want to remember. They're tangible, they're tactile, they're real, and I love them. But my process isn't the only benefactor of this change. My YouTube channel got its first real spike in viewership thanks to this book. For 8 months, my videos would average roughly like 50 views, and I was inspired to make a video about the Renaissance practice of keeping a zibaldone, a journaling technique I learned about in one of these book chapters. Within a few weeks, it had over 20,000 views, and I hit my first 1,000 subscribers, which was a goal I wrote down for myself at the beginning of 2024. So following my curiosity led to a complete overhaul of my writing process, and it changed my channel's trajectory. So next time you feel that urge to follow your curiosity, let it guide you. As Rick Rubin wrote, if you are open and stay tuned to what's happening, the answers will be revealed. And if you're interested in seeing that video about zibaldone journaling, check out this video right over here.